Hey, RetconRaider here, and welcome back to Battle Brothers Season 3. As today, rested, resupplied, we once again set our sights on the legendary goblin city of Rulgazix. Which, given that we are currently winning the Greenskin invasion, largely by virtue of the sheer volume of goblins we've slaughtered, should be enough to hopefully push it over, thus bringing Crisis Cycle 2 to an end. Though not immediately. In theory, we might have time to do one more thing after. Plus, of course, before we actually get to Rulgazix itself, we still need to take out one more outpost. So, while we do have one on the map, it's a pretty tough target. One that threatens to wear us down right before the main event. We'll go ahead and take the scenic approach, peel off another layer of fog, see if we can perhaps find a simpler target, one which does not threaten to sideline any of the indispensable raiders, such as the Camp of 1,000 Arrows, a goblin shelter, and supply stash. That, for example, would make a perfect target, especially since it lets us tag in some of the weaker raiders. Nice to give them a bit more play before we hit that final target, since obviously they're not going to get much use there. Except for Doug, I suppose, since, like, narratively, the Greenskin invasion's kind of his whole thing. So it does feel appropriate for him to be there, even if it does get him killed. En route back to Rulgazix, the raiders find themselves spied upon from afar. The thin wisps of an initial smoke signal going up, near invisible at night, but threatening to expose the raiders' approach. Unless, of course, it were shut down well before dawn, giving those colorful contrails time to fully disperse. And thus the raiders once again wade in. Drakiith the first to charge, promptly stymied by a net, no surprise there. Goblins swarming over the fallen flagellant, and the rest of the raiders rushing in behind, seeking to peel them off. Though perhaps a bit less efficiently than they might have liked, given the slush and snow. Yeah, I mean, if we come back for a Season 4, definitely gotta pick up the Pathfinder perk next time around. It just makes things so much more convenient in certain types of terrain. Woodlands and snow, in particular. Also the occasional swamp, but you know, you generally want to avoid those anyway. The battle lines hastily drawn, the skirmishers continued to seek every advantage they could find. More nets festooning some of the fighters. A few jabs making it past Drakiith's defenses, carving through cuirass, and scoring the flesh beneath. Oof. They are carving off that armor a mite bit faster than I'd like, but his health pool's still doing okay, so nothing to worry about just yet. Arrow gutshot Agabo on south. Giannis yanking the net off Drakiith. Then tag-teaming a screaming skirmisher with an assist from Abalos. Mark takes aim. Two miscreants maimed. Random grunts finding leverage through thick, knotted net, but fails to find purchase. Rook taking time to disentangle instead. Then running Rapscallion through. Though to be fair, his weapon is slightly swifter than the sensor. But also single target, so there is some trade-off there. Seymore surges forth, kicking aside Goblin corpse. Verlin shucking net as well. Douglas doesn't have much luck. But his swing does goad Goblin Goon directly into evening. Drak draws blood, topping off his own. Engaging Ambusher. Oh, and is immediately envenomed for his efforts. Yeah, nimble build's not really great for Gobos. Something to keep in mind for that final assault. Mark misted 2 Malevolence. Then a third as well. Oof, but Drak finally takes a telling blow, jagged pike digging deep tween ribs. Unfortunate. But not the end of the world. He is one we can afford to have sidelined. Arrow ended an irritant. Then gored 2 goons for good measure. Drak started a slow fighting withdrawal. Viego clearing a path. Giannis stepping up to cover. Evening as well. Doug surged south. Though in retrospect, that's probably too exposed. Seymore staunched, sucking wound. A staunch ally indeed. Whilst Fur nudged Douglas slightly over. Yeah, that feels a little better. Gotta remember, Doug's a slightly softer target. Oof, and speaking of softer targets, Evening envenomed. But enemy exsanguinated. Feels like a pretty fair trade-off. Evening pulling a bit of a Chuck Norris there. The Goblin poisoned him, and after a brief moment of absolute agony, the Goblin finally died. Random flailed about. Another foe felled. Oof. Alright, come on now. Yeah, we gotta get him into something slightly heavier. The frantic fighting neared its end. Foes down to their final 5. Drak falling back, knowing better than to tempt fate. Evening ending the last on north, and the Overseer heading for the hills. Ver eviscerated Varlet, then pointed with his spear. After him! He can't escape! He'll warn them of the impending attack. Doug nodded, dashing forward, hammer held high. An ambusher angling after the errant overseer as more raiders rush to intercept. Ooh, not sure we're gonna make that though. But we do have the doggos, as risky as that might be. Giannis lacerated last lout. More raiders rushing to the fore, including Drakiith, who, despite his injuries, knew it was now safe to engage. The ambusher was quickly caught. Culled, courtesy of Doug. And sight set on the overseer beyond. Dogs finally let slip from their leash. Promptly dogpiled. The overseer was no more. And with that final threat snuffed out, the flames were soon to follow. The smoke dispersed. The raiders' approach left clandestine. They swiftly scoured the camp, pocketing some silverware and other assorted supplies, and then moved on. Rulgazix awaited, none the wiser, of the doom that would soon arrive at its gate. Also, level up for evening. Let me just do some quick rearranging here, then we'll give that a peek. Alright, what are we doing here? Evening hits level 6. Oof. Okay, yeah, we can work with this. We'll go ahead and grab Resolve, obviously, since he is still our backup bannerman. The middle in melee is probably a good idea, but honestly, at this point, I think it might be better to simply focus on survivability. Which means slightly more fatigue, and then also that max roll in range defense. I think it'll do for now, especially paired with Brawny, which immediately gives him more leeway on armor, and thus allows us to finally employ our ever-growing arsenal of epic armors. Most of which are probably still a bit too heavy for him, but give me a sec. Let me workshop some potential combos here. Yeah, I think that works. Top tier helm, mid tier body. More or less keeps his whole executioner vibe intact. Pretty happy with that. Though obviously long term we'll eventually get him into something even heavier. We've got no shortage of high-end body armor. Also, we really do need to track down a sword lance. Get him off the front line entirely. I like the poleaxe in theory, but it is not great for what I started building him for. I did not realize when I first equipped it, it was the only poleaxe with no actual reach. Ever since Giannis the Gladiator imbibed one of the anatomist's curios, the pit fighter has not stopped flexing. Many are growing annoyed with the bronzed, glistening, overly muscled man, demanding that the other sellswords take him on, 1 versus 1, in naked wrestling matches. When he's not plying for bouts of grab-ass, he's doing exercises, screaming out between every set, as if he were in a pitched battle. Hopefully this phase of his life ends soon. Oh, buddy. Alright, well, I mean, some real mixed feelings on that one. Obviously not a great time to demoralize the entire company, but also new event that I've never seen before, one I assume is unique to the Anatomist, and we'll certainly take the gains. But it does basically require us to now get into at least 1 or 2 filler fights just to shore up morale. Which I suppose is fine. We've got no shortage of targets of opportunity out here. Oh. Okay. Champion Honor Guard, which means at least a chance of dropping a named Sword Lance. I was just saying we really want to get our hands on a Sword Lance. Obviously, there's no guarantee that's what we'll actually get, but I did also just say we need to do something to offset this morale loss. Already weary of Giannis's seemingly endless energy, the raiders sought respite in needless violence, venturing forth into a bone-strewn battlefield. Bets were hastily placed on who would get the most kills. Giannis, of course, at the forefront, gleeful at the pseudo-gladiatorial game. But no named Sword Lance. Instead, yet another cleaver. But it's fine, we'll take it. Also, I am a bit curious to see how we handle these guys. It's been a while. Not since the Barbarian King team-up, I think. And you know, one of the targets I do have on my list of potential endgame goals is the Obsidian Monolith, so I mean, depending on how well we handle these guys, that will definitely help decide whether or not we actually take a stab at it. With that set and bony bodyguards bearing down, battle was quickly joined. Diego dashing in, stumbling slightly on uneven stone. Yeah, I see, like, this would be another great case for having the Pathfinder perk, since even just this slightly uneven terrain slows us down. The trick being, you know, which perk do you then live without? With my immediate thought, of course, being Colossus, which has admittedly saved a few folks' lives, but, you know, at the same time, there is no gain without some cost. And I do think ultimately I'd probably prefer mobility over being a slightly better meat shield. The attack began in earnest, projectiles plinking off plate, shields held high. Giannis claiming first kill. "That's one!" he cried as he punted a helmed head. Rack stepped past, almost casually crushing another. Look at that, we're tied. And further down the line, the fray continued. Heavy blows handed out like penny candy. Though no further foes yet fell. "That's two," Mal shouted over the din. "Better kill quicker, lads, or you'll never catch up." Okay, we're not doing bad. We're killing them pretty quick, though we are taking some dings in return. "Out of the way!" Giannis shouted, trying to push past Rax's axe. Meanwhile, the rest of the raiders continued to roust the restless dead. Seymore stalled by sickly smoke. Random repositioned, backing Ver. Rax wrecked another on rear. Then circled wide, leaving an opening for Giannis. Though, sadly, the soft terrain still slowed him enough that he could not strike, giving Seymore time to claim his first. And almost his second as well, my goodness. Yeah, these guys do seem fairly vulnerable to heavy cleavers, which does bode well for a potential monolith run. Though that's the thing we have to worry about, is that these guys still hit pretty hard. This, of course, is a mere fraction of what we would face if we were to take on that particular target. I want to say the actual monolith is like 3 times more. That's 2, Giannis said, pushing past Rax again, blocking his approach. Maybe take it a bit easier, Diego suggested from off to one side. We do still want to make it through this unscathed. He repositioned to assist Rax, but unfortunately fell just short. That low fatigue once again coming back to bite us. But Rax still took advantage. That's 1, Seymore gasped, hefting his sword for another swing. And so it went. The foes had fallen fairly swiftly. Only 5 yet still stood. "1," Valen said, before stepping off to one side, haft hefted in hand. Seymore sprinted through smoke. No real hopes of winning the contest at this point, but he still had to try. Rax wrecking a 3rd. Look at that. Guess I win. Not so fast, big guy, Diego called back. I think Mel's got this one. The disowned noble chuckled, but then cursed as his first swing went wide. But 2 targets remained. Enough for a raider to potentially tie. Or even somehow claim the lead. As unlikely as that might be. Seymore stepping up to the gold kopeshed cadaver. Only now seeming to realize there was something about this one that was different. A decidedly deadlier foe. Perhaps better preserved or simply better equipped? Something seemed to set this one apart from the rest of its skeletal crew. There, 3, Mal muttered, glancing back gloatingly at Giannis, who had failed to push past. But one target still remained. Pitted plate peeled away, piece by piece. As mighty as it might have once been, its end was now near. But still, it stubbornly fought on, clinging as best it could to that cursed half-life. "He's mine!" Giannis shouted. Just a bit too slow, Verlin chuckled. The rest of the raiders laughed. The contest had been a tie, a toss-up between Rax and Malafnoy. Giannis grunted and grumbled, but despite the loss, had still learned. And regardless of whom had actually won, the raiders all shared in the collective prize. Peculiar pieces of ancient armament. Some potentially useful, but most simply worth their weight in gold. Yeah, I mean, we'll take pretty much everything. We'll dump things as need be, but I feel like most of it's well worth the space. Sadly, didn't do much to actually offset our current morale loss, but it's a start. And we did pull a level up, for Giannis of all people, which does feel thematically appropriate. Resolve would make sense, but no, I think we want to get that RDEF up to at least 20. Especially going into Rule Gazix. And Sword Lance for evening. Not a bad get. Suppose we should also do a quick side-by-side on that Kopesh. Okay. Lower overall damage, but better against armor. More of a fatigue hit, but reduced cost on individual attacks. I do feel like our current is better, but I'd be curious to hear what y'all think. And, always nice to have more options. We also pulled that shield, though we'll just keep that in reserve for now. That's it. Let's go pick another fight. See if we can actually get our morale back up. Also, I think we have to wait anyway for another event to fire, one that tells us we destroyed enough outposts. Last thing we want is to go all the way back to Rule Gazix only to find out that one of the places we destroyed apparently didn't count. Sorry, just reshuffling to put evening on the back line. And on we go. Let's see what we can find. Another champion, perhaps? Rustling Thicket. Man, you know what I would like to see are those frickin' treants, those, the walking tree monsters. We still haven't encountered one. That's one of the very few potions we still need. The Shot. Antlerfold. And I mean, this really does feel like the kind of place you'd find them, but apparently not. Slightly easier goblin outposts, but not really what we want. We've already killed plenty of gobos, and we've got plenty more ahead of us without tagging yet more in. Ooh, Hex. You know, that's maybe slightly riskier than I'd really like, since it turns our own against us, but also we rarely get the opportunity to really harvest many Hex parts. You know what, we're still waiting for that event to fire anyway. And it's not like we have time for Rule Gazix today regardless, but yeah, I think we'll go ahead and do it. Though I should probably pull anyone under 50 resolve out of the current lineup. As the raiders drew ever closer to their intended target, they stumbled upon another troop, another group of seeming mercenaries. An odd sight indeed, this deep into goblin territory. And so they made their approach, hopeful that they might find some allies for this final fight. But alas, 'twas not to be. For no sooner had they settled in and broken bread than the signs of something sinister emerged. The men, sellswords, or so they claimed, all seemed slightly off, and the number of camp followers seemed unusually large, especially for a group embedded so far behind enemy lines. Eventually growing leery, the raiders thought it best to simply be on their way. But, predictably, as they did so, the supposed sellswords stood en masse, blocking their escape. It was hard to say exactly what the Hexen hoped to get from this. But regardless of reason, the raiders were left with no choice but to fight. And fight they did. Arrow first to act. A well-placed shot cutting down one of the wicked Coven in the blink of an eye. Her two sisters swiftly ensorceling Mal, though the rest of the raiders remained stubbornly reticent, resisting their charms. And Rax simply pinned Mal down. "All right, settle down," he growled. Even as the rest of the ensorcelled sellsword surged forth, the first met by flail, the crunch of ribs boding poorly for his long-term health. Verlin smacked Mal off to one side, helping Rax keep him contained. The rest of the raiders working their way around. Seymore disarming a deluded dastard. Evening getting in a good swing with his new sword lance. Tommy pitching in, if somewhat ineffectually. And Arrow once again took aim. A wicked witch wounded, shoulder lanced. Though Mal still neath her malevolent influence. Giannis headed off another foe, carving through center, surging towards the sorceress back line. Rax simply staying put, keeping Mal from hurting himself or anyone else in the confusion. Mark murked one on North, unhanding another. Tommy took one down on South. Random cracked a skull. An arrow took aim. His shot sliced through second seductress. A shrill scream sounding as both she and her sister fell. Mal finally freed, turning his ire on the still somehow ensorcelled sellswords. Though with the loss of their lusty leaders, they were all but useless regardless, as nice as it might have been to have more bodies for the pending battle. So, the raiders simply put them down. Evening ending 1. Rax finally rushing forward. Tommy axing the second to last. Giannis cutting off potential escape. And Rax claiming the final kill. All told, honestly, a kind of shockingly simple victory considering the foes, but with a well-earned level up for Arrow, who definitely trivialized that fight. Nicely done. The raiders rummaged through their meager belongings, collecting a few curio here and there, but sadly finding little else of note. And they once again went on their way. Arrow talking up his triple takedown. The entire company's resolve restored. Well, aside from a few of the folks stuck on the bench. Yeah, I probably should have dug in there, but it's fine. Though Trip and Zarmal, as much as I like them, they're not going into Rule Gazix. They're just not well suited for goblin fights. So they're both sitting that one out, as are Drak. Evening. Not sure about the rest just yet. I'll have to mull on it a bit. I mean, honestly, I think the biggest question mark is going to be how much range we go in with. Since with 40 plus enemies on the field, trying to keep our backliner safe might be a bit too much to deal with. Might be better to just go in all melee instead. I mean, it would be nice to have some guns. They can definitely clear out gobos pretty quick. I'll give it some thought. For now, we continue our approach, wait for that event to fire. Yeah, we'll pass on that for the moment. But we will, scout targets. See if there's anything we might want to hit on the way back out. Though honestly, after that Ancient Honor Guard fight, I am seriously considering the Obsidian Monolith. With so many goblins taken care of, it is likely that word of their deaths and annihilations will reach back to the Greenskin City. If that goblin expert is as learned as he seems, the goblins will overreact and send their armies out, leaving the gates largely undefended. Perhaps it is time to return to the Goblin City and see if the stranger's summations ring true. Indeed. Let's find our way back. Right, and then that. that highlights the other reason that the Obsidian Monolith does kind of give me pause, which is that it's not just ancient honor guards. It's also a bunch of ancient priests, and those are slightly more daunting foes. But, you know, still something to think about. That said, feels like this is probably the best place to go ahead and call this, because I imagine Rule Gazix itself is going to be quite the ordeal. Sadly, no unique enemies, at least as far as I'm aware. But I do know that it is at least 40 strong. Thus, we'll hit the pause button for now whilst I make final preparations. And we'll pick up here next time, as we go in. A final fateful battle for the fate of humanity. Or at least the ones who happen to live nearby. See you then. Oh, and special thanks to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible, including but not limited to Eerie V23, Revenant, Alois, Bowman, Drakiith, EgonAlter, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, James Trimmier, Lady Shayna, Mark Giemza, RandomPassrby, RobbyB, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, if you'd also like to help support the channel, then feel free to push the buttons that do the things. Trust me, it does make a difference. Or you could even check out the PayPal, the Patreon, the Nexus GG, or the YouTube memberships. Links are in the description.